Strasbourg, summer of 1518. The air hung thick and humid, heavy with the river's scent and the city's murmur. For Frau Trophäa, it was just another Tuesday, a day of quiet routine. But then, on July 14th, something shifted. An unseen, unheard force began to stir within her. She stepped into the narrow cobblestone street, and she began to dance. Not a joyful jig, but a strange, compulsive movement. Her feet shuffled, arms swayed, body twisting in an involuntary rhythm. There was no music, no festival, no apparent reason. Just Frau Trophäa, dancing alone, under the indifferent summer sun. Hours passed. The sun climbed, then descended. Frau Trophäa did not stop. Her movements grew more frantic, breathing ragged. Passers-by watched, first curious, then alarmed. They saw a lone figure possessed by an invisible force, her face a mask of exhaustion and strange, distant intensity. Night fell, bringing a chill, but still, she danced. Through the dark, silent hours, her feet continued their relentless rhythm. By morning, her clothes were soaked, hair matted, eyes wide and bloodshot. She had danced for a full day and night, without food, water, or rest. She showed no sign of stopping. The sight of Frau Trophäa, still dancing, drew a crowd. People gathered, murmuring, pointing, their faces a mixture of fear and fascination. But then, an even stranger thing began. One by one, others joined her. A man, then a woman, then another, their bodies moving with the same involuntary compulsion. It started subtly, a twitch, a sway, then a full, unstoppable dance. Like an unseen current, the affliction rippled through the community. Within a week, a dozen people were caught in its grip. Their numbers swelled. By the end of July, 50 people were dancing. By August, it was hundreds. They filled public squares, their movements a grotesque, never-ending spectacle. Some danced with eyes closed, sweat plastering hair to temples. Others stared blankly, faces contorted, limbs jerking with unnatural energy. There was no joy, no celebratory spirit, only a grim, desperate compulsion. The music, if any, was only in their minds, a phantom rhythm driving them towards an unknown end. The city watched in horror. This was no ordinary illness. It was a plague of movement, a bizarre contagion defying all understanding. Families tried to intervene, to physically restrain loved ones, but it was useless. Dancers fought back with surprising strength, breaking free to rejoin the swirling mass, drawn back by an invisible, irresistible force. As the dancers swelled, panic gripped Strasbourg. The city council, bewildered, convened. This was not a plague of boils or fever, but a psychological assault manifesting as relentless physical exertion. Their initial response was tragically misguided. Believing dancers suffered from hot blood, a medieval medical theory, authorities concluded the only cure was to let them dance it out. They reasoned that if the afflicted exhausted themselves, the frenzy would pass. They even opened guild halls, set up stages, and hired musicians. Streets were cleared, providing space for the terrifying ordeal. The irony was grim. Instead of stopping, these measures seemed to amplify it. The sight of so many, day and night, swaying and twitching, became a macabre spectacle. The constant rhythm of the hired musicians, meant to help, may have only fueled the perceived urgency. But the dancers were not just moving, they were suffering. Their bodies, pushed past human limits, began to fail. Feet bled, joints screamed in agony. Many collapsed from exhaustion, dehydration, or heart attacks. The streets became a horrifying tableau of relentless movement, interspersed with sudden, tragic stillness. The death toll mounted. At its peak, reports suggested up to 15 people were dying each day. The sheer physical endurance of the dancers was astonishing, terrifying. For days, some for weeks, they continued their frantic, involuntary movements. Faces grew gaunt, eyes sunken, clothing turned to rags from constant friction and sweat. Many danced until bones ached, muscles tore, hearts simply gave out. What drove them? What force could compel a human body to endure such extreme suffering, to dance itself to death? 16th century medical knowledge offered no answers. Physicians, baffled, attributed it to divine punishment, demonic possession, or an excess of humors. They bled patients, applied poultices, and offered prayers, all to no avail. The dancing plague was not isolated to Strasbourg. Historical records indicate similar outbreaks across Europe, though none as severe or prolonged. Each instance presented the same horrifying pattern, an inexplicable, compulsive urge to dance, leading to exhaustion, injury, and often death. Modern science, with its understanding of neurology and psychology, still struggles to fully explain these events. There was no clear pathogen, no obvious toxin. The collective madness seemed to arise from within, a dark, internal storm unleashed upon an unsuspecting populace. It was an epidemic of the mind, manifesting in its most brutal physical form. Over centuries, various theories have emerged to make sense of the dancing plague. One prominent idea points to ergotism, poisoning caused by fungus on rye grain. Ergot can cause convulsions, hallucinations, and a burning sensation. While some symptoms align, the specific prolonged dancing doesn't perfectly fit. Ergot usually leads to gangrene or seizures, not sustained, rhythmic movement. Another theory centers on mass psychogenic illness, or mass hysteria. In times of extreme stress, fear, and religious fervor, psychological factors can trigger widespread physical symptoms with no clear organic cause. Strasbourg in 1518 was ripe for such an outbreak. Poverty, famine, disease, and superstition were rampant. Collective anxiety could have manifested as this bizarre, uncontrollable dancing, an explanation acknowledging the mind's profound power over the body. Some historians suggest a connection to local religious practices, where dancing was sometimes used in rituals. Perhaps, in a distorted, extreme form, this cultural practice merged with prevailing anxiety, creating a destructive feedback loop. Yet, none of these theories fully account for the scale, intensity, or relentless nature of the dancing. They offer plausible contributing factors, but the core mystery, the sheer undeniable compulsion that drove hundreds to their deaths, remains elusive. A silent, invisible force compelled them. Eventually, as mysteriously as it began, the dancing plague of 1518 subsided. By early September, dancers dwindled. Survivors, gaunt and traumatized, were sent to shrines to pray for absolution and recovery. The city slowly returned to its grim routine, but the memory of that summer's terror would linger. Today, the story of the dancing plague remains one of history's most unsettling medical mysteries. It serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of the human mind and body, and the strange, dark paths collective suffering can take. We look back at the accounts, at the terrified words of chroniclers, and try to imagine hundreds of people, driven by invisible torment, their bodies moving until they broke. What truly happened on those cobblestone streets of Strasbourg? Was it a medical anomaly, a psychological phenomenon, or something else entirely? A forgotten pathogen, a unique environmental toxin, a mass delusion born of unimaginable despair? The answers are lost to time, buried beneath centuries of dust and conjecture. All we are left with are the accounts, chilling records of a city that watched its own citizens dance themselves into graves. A profound, unsettling question echoes from the past. What force, known or unknown, could possess a person so completely and compel them to their own destruction? The music has long since faded, but the silent, desperate rhythm of the dancing plague still haunts the periphery of human understanding, a dark, unsolved whisper from history.